Yo, what is up, people? What is up, people? What is up, people? It is your boy MM2K, and look, I can't be here long because I got a appointment today. So I'm gonna be leaving here. We're gonna be going through this in like 30 minutes. I got a very important appointment. I was just messing with my shout out to D Batch, man. D, if you're catching this, I didn't mean it personally. You know I like messing with you, man. D likes spouting stuff, and sometimes it just works my nerves because he just says anything. But shout out to D Batch, because he's actually going to be part of this video, and he doesn't even know it himself. But shout out to D Batch, man. Me and D don't agree with anything on gaming, but he's out there doing his thing, man. He's out there putting out his Xbox propaganda, and you know I can't be mad at him for it. He's doing his thing, man. Shout out to D, brother from another mother. And if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, D Batch, who is that? Then this podcast is specifically for you. It's specifically for you. Now, I know Cold Blood Sensei's eyes are rolling in the back of his head. He's like, this is about D Batch. No. It'll all make sense shortly. But what inspired this podcast, and I'm going to go through this quickly, is I've been having conversations. Well, it all started with my good brother Jack, my co-partner over there at Cloud Dosage. You know, we was, you know, doing a friendly back and forth, you know, because we have different perspectives on these platforms. And he's coming at it from the cloud gamer perspective, from the cloud gamer origin. I'm coming from it from a way deeper origin where there's way bigger conversations happening. And sometimes we're talking past each other, or I'm going to say the conversations don't mesh because of the origins of where we're coming from. I can't properly go into a vegan shop and taste the food there if I'm expecting to get the full ambiance of real meat. Like when I go into a vegan shop and I'm eating vegan food, I got to understand, look, this is catered a certain way because it's formulated a certain way because this is vegan food, so it's plateau as far as taste and how and texture and stuff like that. It's going to be different from real meat. I can't have the expectation of real meat going into a vegan shop. Now, the closest it gets to real meat, the better it is, right? As far as taste, depending upon certain things, you know, health wise, as far as how healthy it was put together. But I can't take my regular meat expectations into a vegan shop and then grade upon that. So what ends up happening a lot of times is the conversations that we have, they're very entertaining, they're comical, and they're all lighthearted, and you know, they're just there to spark thought, but they don't always mesh well together because, again, the origins of where I'm coming from are a lot deeper. They're dealing with a lot bigger conversations. They're involving people that you guys don't even know exist. Which, if you don't know these people exist, that just shows you how different the lane is in the conversations that we're having. I know we always think that we're the all-seeing eye and what we like is what should be paramount for all. But if you're self-aware and you can truly respect, not just in saying so, but truly respecting your actions, the difference of others, you'll understand, or so, that's not for me. That's a high-end car consumer. So even though there's nothing wrong with my Prius, it drives fine, it's great on gas and the mileage. If these people are squawking about it, that's because they're looking at it from a different prism. That's not a conversation for me to jump in because their expectations are completely different from mine, and that's okay. Not a conversation for me. I'm an anime lover. If you don't love animes and you're sitting there watching an anime with me, that's like you telling me, oh, this is stupid, it's a cartoon. You know, why are you watching anime? You have no season in this culture where I've been watching anime since Fist of the North Star. You can't relate to this, is what I'm basically trying to say. If you don't know who D Batch is, and Cold Blood and I know him because he's always thrown in the middle of this stuff, and we're always calling him L Batch and all this other stuff. But if you don't know who he is, then this is the podcast for you. All right. And shout out to everybody. Welcome to Mic Check. Like I said, we're going to make this quick. But yeah, I was having a conversation with my good friend Jack, light-spirited one, and there was follow-up comments that have been sent my way based upon that. And I just want to say, again, me and Jack, we get along. Calm down. Nobody, you know what I'm saying? Like, Jack is very poignant in his opinions, and so am I. And at times he's going to express his opinions of whether it's me or anybody, and I'm going to do the same. There's no love laws. It's actually encouraged, because we want this cloud community to be diverse. And what I particularly want you to do is I want you to understand the bigger landscape here. I don't want you to be trapped in your bubble of just what's going on with our community. There's a bigger plateau of events that will affect the future of cloud gaming outside of our tent. And you need to understand how the dynamics work. Doesn't mean you got to agree with them, but you got to understand your surroundings. All right. Let's get into today's podcast. Shout out to Cold Blood. He says, what anti-Xbox narrative do you have for us today? I agree that with that that Xbox is doggish. You saw that you saw the latest episode of RDX podcast. And if you don't know what RDX podcast is, pull up a seat. You're about to get educated. So the topic today is my Xbox origins, right? Like, how did I get here with Xbox? And again, this was brought about because of what started off as me going through the typical rigors of the content that I might put out there on social media, and some of the misconceptions behind that content that come from not just the cloud community, but maybe newer gamers that are newer, that are like, oh, whoa, why is there this consistent negativity about Xbox? We're going to get into it. I use a scenario when talking to Jack, which is, I think, crystallizes this. It's hard being that employee that gets called in the office every day. Like, I've had hiring and firing duties. And I would have that employee that just wasn't cutting the mustard. They were nice. They meant well. They really wanted to excel. They just weren't doing it. And when you're at a job, there are expectations. We just don't pay people just because they're sitting there. We don't pay people because they're participating. And it was my job as a manager to ensure that's not occurring. People have to, there's standards set. We agree to the standards each year when we do our preliminary setup for our performance appraisals. You agree to it. I establish the goals, which I even get the goals from my higher ups. We cater them to our specific areas. We've established an understanding to those goals. You've agreed to them, that this is what you're going to do. You even written synopsis on how you plan to achieve them this year, and then you're not achieving them. So yes, we're going to be sitting in the office until it gets rectified. So when do I stop talking about Xbox? When these problems that we're saying are paramount and not just detrimental to Xbox, but really detrimental to gaming, because as long as Xbox isn't competing in this space the way that they promised to do, then that leaves everything in Sony's lap. And even though I'm satisfied with Sony, I'll put it like this. Even though I feel what Sony is doing is satisfactory, right, Cold Blood? We'll say it's satisfactory. They're not, I don't think they're at this moment, particularly with this year, they're taking gaming to a plateau never experienced. And they're more reluctant to do that when they don't have competition. Okay? So that's why, number one, we got a set of promises coming from one brand that are not being met decades long. Again, like I said, this origin is deep. We've been talking with gamers, dealing with gamers that are confused or whatever, decades long. Not since 2019, when a lot of people that are judging Xbox from that small prism and from that small scope of cloud gaming in particular when they started, I can game over the cloud. That's, it's cool. I can go pew, pew, pew. And the latency is bearable. The gaming is bearable. And I get to do this and I get it. It's fine with me. When you're dealing with it at that small prism, yeah, you have no problem. But it's kind of like, all right, that's like saying, well, you know what? I just started eating candy. Yeah, I've been eating it, consistently day after day, but I've been eating candy for 5 days in a row, not really brushing my teeth. My teeth are fine. So what do we got all these dentists around here for? What are they doing all this drilling for? Yeah, I mean, it's great that you've been having candy for 5 days and your teeth are fine, but we got a lot of people that have been dealing with issues much longer. Their teeth are rotten, falling out of their head. Mouths are stinking, halitosis. You don't fit in every category. There are different demographics and certain conversations. There's conversations I don't fit into. If you're going to operate in this gaming space with a capital G, you have to understand that you're either going to sink or swim. Because one day cloud gaming is going to be a lot more robust, closer to mainstream. And if you can't get a grip on the different demographics that make up gaming with a capital G, you're going to sink. You're not going to swim. So let's take a deeper look in the bigger conversation that's happening here. You know what I mean? I see what you're saying, Cold Blood. He said, spreading misinformation left and right is what Diller does best. And unfortunately for D, he gets caught up in the BS. You know what? I have problems with things that are said out of that space. And I think what people don't understand is how my content starts is I see, like you said, the stuff that is being said out of that space that just isn't right. That's deceitful. 40 to 50 frame deltas between that and the play. All this stuff that people heard from content creators that were getting pats on the head from Xbox, like, yeah, these guys are great. These guys are great sources. They understand what we're doing. You listen to what these guys are saying. And they're just pulling stuff out of their rear end. And if I was not the wiser and I'm listening to stuff out of that space, hell yeah, I'm going to be dropping $400 or $500 on an Xbox Series X. Day one. Or hell yeah, I'm going to be invested in the ecosystem. But if those lies and those deceits were the things that drew me to the platform, and now I'm disgruntled, I can't simply say, look, these people from this 1% slot are happy, so you, the much bigger populace that are disgruntled about certain things, you don't matter. Like this, again, being in our small tents, we think this conversation and the ires and the criticisms are being launched solely from the ponies or PlayStation fans. There's been a whole week of conversations and debate within the Xbox community themselves about the stuff that I'm talking about. People that don't agree with me on anything on gaming, and you are not the wiser. You are limited in your experience because you just stay in our small tent within cloud gaming. No, that's wrong. You're not disseminating the information properly when you do that. Now, if you're like, look, man, we don't care about those conversations. We don't relate to them. They don't matter to us. We're just going to focus on this small piece of the pie. That's fine. But we can't talk about gaming at a granular level when you don't understand what's happening with the granular, at what's happening at the granular level with the consumer. These are the same consumers that you're going to need to put down their box and pick up the dongle. We don't help in that process if we can't relate or we don't understand. You ain't got to agree. But if you can't relate or at the very least understand, you're going to sink, not swim in this. Let's go over the origin story, man. I came back to gaming because of Xbox. It was the Xbox OG generation. I loved it. Did so much for me. Then okay. So let me explain in particular detail how. There was a void for me with gaming where I didn't think the games that were coming out were so great. Like, I enjoyed my JRPGs, but that was about it. Everything else that was coming out at the time really didn't entertain me, right? And then you started seeing Xbox come through with, partnering with developers for games like Jade Empire, Armed and Dangerous, Knights of the Old Republic. And then you go to the Xbox 360, which I want to say since the beginning of the play, if you start with me from PlayStation 1 till now, my favorite console generation is the 360 generation. That's just me. If you start, if you go prior, for me it's the Genesis, but I don't want to go to, because we're limited on time. But those games for the OG Xbox, then you go to, I think, games that really changed the dynamic of gaming: BioShock, Mass Effect. Those are games that Microsoft, under Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, they worked with those developers and said, how can we support you? It wasn't just, the people that were in head of Xbox. Like, you had Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates actually working with the developers and listening, playing these games and listening to them and saying, how can we help you? Ken Levine talked specifically about his meeting before E3, I think it was, with Steve Ballmer and Bill Gates, and how it was pivotal for that game to be the success that it was. So Microsoft was making essential partnerships and creating games that we've never seen in the console space before, and forever changing gaming. Like, gaming has changed forever because of Xbox, right? Then Phil Spencer takes over with the Xbox One. It was the bungled launch, where I think a lot of it was unfair how Microsoft was being framed, but whatever. And Steve Ballmer and all his people are gone, pretty much. And then it's the Satya Nadella and Phil Spencer era. And Satya is different from his predecessors. He's not a gamer, or he doesn't appreciate the art. He's just looking at it from a business transactional perspective. Phil Spencer is a big time gamer at heart, but he's more like a buffet gamer, where he wanted to smooth out Xbox's brand from it being like a hardcore platform first and foremost, and then everything else, came in as layers. He wanted it to be he wanted to just to present a gaming ecosystem that just put a bunch of games in front of people. And he said that at DICE, he was like, just playing a bunch of games with his dad and stuff like that, that was essential to him. And when you talk about how you've interacted with gaming from your youth, that speaks volumes. I talked about that with Purple Haze and how that's molded my expectations now. You know what I'm saying? In my 40s as a grandfather. The games that I was experienced to as a youth have at the center of what I like and dislike now. So Phil Spencer talked about that at DICE and so forth. And he wants gamers to get more games in their hands, become more cultured, because it meant so much to him. Well, I mean, that's fine and dandy and all, but when you make that now your focus and you water down your focus on AAA genre defining gaming, the focus that made you what you are, that made you actually competitive and actually started helping spur the best games of the last few generations, because it got PlayStation on their toes. Like, you don't get Uncharted at the quality that you get. You don't get Demon Souls, Last of Us. You don't get those games without Microsoft breathing down their neck the way that they were and pretty much splitting that generation with the 360 generation. So now you pull back that focus, people are like, well, what is your identity? Well, we're a little bit of everything for everybody. Nah, that's not an identity. I'm out. And over time, that's what happened. And then we began to fall away because of that, because it was their original identity that brought us to the platform. But and changing the identity is one thing. Like Nintendo did it. Nintendo always wanted to be like within the AAA hunt, but they had more eccentric gaming, and they stepped out, and then they started the Wii, and the rest is history. That's not a problem, changing your direction. But what Microsoft did is they're internally changing their direction, but they're showing you the same aesthetic, which is deceitful. They talk about, we're down with AAA hardcore games. We're going to give you the best experience. Microsoft will never, these are words that Phil Spencer said, will never have the least powerful console ever again. This, that, and the other. And then here we got the most powerful console in the world. Xbox Series X comes out and it's splitting hairs with the PlayStation 5 and even the cheaper version. The Xbox Series S is going to be a 1440p 60 machine for old games, mate. You know what I mean? And then there's just countless things after countless things that they've fallen short on as far as their promises go. Promise better AAA games. For 10 years, they've been promising that. They promised cloud gaming efforts with Catapult Gaming for all. And, with the Xbox Series X server blades, people got a look of it. They were like, this is abysmal. And it really was a stain to cloud gaming. You know what I mean? Less important, but just something that goes on the list as well. Part of our next generation experience has to be VR. You can't have a next generation experience without VR. Quality of Game Pass would increase their saturation via their hardware. They said that to GameIndustry.biz. We feel like that we're going to focus on the quality of Game Pass so heavily that it's going to exponentially just, have our console selling gangbusters. And now they're backing away from that. And again, like I said, the aforementioned Xbox Series X SX combo for the S is just a scaled down version of the X, right? Now it's to the point to where, because of the parity clause with the S and the underperformance of the S due to its memory bottleneck, that great games like Baldur's Gate 3, they're coming to PlayStation. Games that were not intended to be quote unquote timed exclusive, by attrition are becoming timed exclusive. There's just a litany of promises that go a decade long that Xbox has been putting out there to lure consumers that they just don't meet. And I've never seen, I've never seen any gaming company put out so many promises and fail to land so many of them. So yeah, if you're coming into gaming in 2019 and you're just looking at that small slice, it's not so bad. But again, there's been conversations that have been had for 10 years under this new regime, or they're not new no more, under this current regime, that we're having those conversations. You don't know the half, because you literally just came into this 3 years ago, right? So all these promises have fell way short, and what we've gotten instead over those 10 years is buying and isolating decades-long multi-plat companies and eliminating consumer quality choice. We hear with ABK and Bethesda, we're giving gamers more choice. You know what I'm saying? That's baloney. We know Bethesda would have been on GFN without Xbox's intervention. And then, like I said, there's court documents that, where the regulators said, look, this ABK stuff was coming as well. But here's what happens. Because it's going through Microsoft, at some point in time, they're going to yank it off other cloud platforms. It's going to go through their cloud service. And if their cloud service isn't up to snuff, that's lessening the quality that people have access to, because you're yanking it off other platforms, putting it through yours. And like I said, we got a litany of stuff that you're just not accomplishing. And again, there is a overall quality discussion that's being talked about for over 10 years. And it's not as simple as, well, if you don't like the quality, just leave them alone. Microsoft is essential to the development of genre-defining games. There's only two pillars at this moment: Microsoft, PlayStation. as far as platforms are concerned. We don't want to leave it in the hands of PlayStation, nor do we want Microsoft's answer. Okay, we're just going to gobble up the stuff that you could truly freely experience elsewhere and make it exclusive because we don't know how to curate our own content. And these are the people that are having these conversations that like Xbox. And their communities are their communities alone for each of these creators, for the most part, maybe with exception of one or two, are bigger than the cloud community, period. So like I said, when you don't understand the gravity of the conversations that are going on, trust me, I'm about to show you. Let's get into it. We're going to start off with Tim Dog. Do you know who Tim Dog is? If you don't know who Tim Dog is, then do less talking, do more listening. Tim Dog is the de facto face of the Xbox community on social media. Him and Phil Spencer are buddies. Matter of fact, let me see if I can find. And shout out to my brother Tim Dog. Tim, I hope everything is going good with you, brother. You know what I'm talking about. Let me see if I can find Tim's. Tim has a picture where he's it's he drove on. Tim had some free time a weekend. Phil Spencer was in the vicinity. Him and Phil Spencer met up at a bar. They took a picture together. Sky games with Phil all the time. He is the de facto face of Xbox and social media community. He's known to get into it with Jeff Keighley and all the other stuff. He has a following of 78,000 people. How did Tim get his start? Well, my mentor, my homie, Next Gen 720. Do I have Next Gen up here? I should have him up here. I must have. My mentor, Next Gen 720, opened the door for Tim. The overwhelming majority of people that I'm about to show you, Next Gen opened the door for. They were part of a podcast together called BGSD. That all started with Next Gen. Now look at Tim. Almost 80,000. He operates pretty much on Twitter. So if you don't know him, that's where the talking needs to stop and the listening needs to start. He's been part of this conversation, but he's part of the conversation in favor of Xbox. The next few people that I'm going to show you are having the conversation in favor of Xbox. Then there's D-Batch. D-Batch has almost 18,000 followers on Twitter. I mean, on YouTube. Not really active on YouTube. Recently, he's been a little bit more active. He's more been part of the RDX podcast, where if you don't know what the RDX podcast is, you need to do less talking, more listening to understand the granular conversation. My brother's averaging 5,000 views a video. That's on a bad day for D-Batch. All right. Also part of RDX is Colt Eastwood. Now you got to know who Colt. If you don't know who Colt Eastwood is, come on. Another one in favor of Xbox who has a conversation, over 156,000 subscribers. Another one that was, brought to the forefront by my brother Next Gen 720, was part of his podcast originally. Tim, D-Batch, and Colt were pretty much discovered by Z. Z put them on the that was their claim to fame, is going through Z's podcast. Diller Gaming, the host of RDX podcast, the number one, might I say, even though it's the number one Xbox podcast out there on YouTube. Number one. Diller's at 110,000 subscribers. Let's just go take a look at some of Diller's videos. Diller, it's on a bad day, Diller's getting 17,000 views, 33,000, 62,000 live. RDX. RDX is, this was it was only 14 hours ago. This is going to hit up to 15, 20,000. All four people were discovered and repped by Z. He's the one that put them, you could thank him. They come out of the School of Z, Next Gen 720. Shout out to my brother Randolph Thor. Now, Randolph Thor, he came through a different path, but shout out to Randolph. Randolph's almost at 100,000 views. He's the co-host of the Xbox podcast, The Xbox 2. He does it with Jez Gordon of Windows Central. All 5 of these people are pro Xbox. They're having this decades-long conversation that we've been talking about Xbox, what they're going to do, when are they going to finally turn it around, what it is that they're looking to do, but they have it in favor of Xbox. Most of these people I've been on podcasts with. Most of these people have come on my podcast. When I did this before cloud gaming, I was headed in a certain trajectory, and I decided to take a step back, even though it was for a lesser population. But it ain't about numbers for me. It's about sharing the truth and submitting the truth. And I took that step back and that step away to help be a voice to promote cloud gaming for those that it would be, ideal for. I wasn't trying to convince you that you got to play it, but I wanted you to know the truth about it. And that's why a lot of people gave me static. They gave me heartburn because they're like, dude, you said Randolph Thor's doing multiple show ups on your podcast. You know what I'm saying? You're on podcasts with Tim and D and stuff like that, or your community. You know what I'm saying? You're regularly talking to these people. Why would you abandon all that potential success to go do Stadia? Because our platform has always been about being the counter narrative to the false information. Now, those are just the Xbox. Well, there's one more group too, Rebel FM. They don't necessarily do podcasts on YouTube, but they have great content on out there, period. Rebel FM is another, they're very split down the middle, but they're very pro Xbox. Now, all these people, I don't agree with their takes on this, but we are all having the same conversation. Tim Dog alone dwarfs the regular active users in the cloud community. Tim Dog alone. Tim Dog alone does. There is a bigger conversation happening that you're not acclimated to. And you don't have to be, because what you like is within your scope, cloud community. But you can't speak, your smaller scope can't speak for this bigger scope and all these events that have happened beforehand, all this investment and the ups and downs that people have gone through before you've hit the scene. You can't relate. That has to be understood. Doesn't mean that you're wrong because if you're focused on your scope, but to sit there and say, well, you know what? I've been eating candy for 5 days straight. My teeth are fine. Why do you need a dentist? Because they've been eating candy 360,000 days straight. They need some work done. So there's been investment, conversations, expectations not being met, why they're not being met, and discussions surrounding all that past 10 years that are out of your little scope of events that started in 2019. And I'm not trying to belittle them, but we got to have that coming to Jesus moment. You got to understand what's going on here and understand that every discussion may not be for you. It's okay. It's all right. It's like every discussion ain't for me. There might be a group of cloud gamers that have a specific conversation that are outside of my scope, and I'm like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not really big on Xbox, but what they're talking about I can't relate to, so it's not for me. Those are just the Xbox people, and I put them out there so you can listen to them, so you can better understand the larger the larger conversation that's happening about these platforms. On the PlayStation side, there's my people at What's Up PlayStation. There's the homie Porter Rock, 8,000 views. Oh, that's What's Up PlayStation again. That's that. You know what? I must have. Is that who I mixed up? Yeah, there goes Z right there. You know, of course, we know Next Gen 720, 17,000 viewers. What's Up PlayStation? And then Reforged Gaming really ain't. He's not a PlayStation guy. I mean, he's not a PlayStation podcaster. He just favors PlayStation, but I put him out there too. And there are dozens of there's Kid Smooth, Doctor. There's dozens of mainstream content creators that I haven't even put up here. King Thrash, so forth. For the sake of time. If you don't know who these people are, you don't understand the bigger conversation going on. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it. Doesn't mean that you got to think it's important. But understand who's talking to you in your scope and who's not. And often I'm reacting to the bigger mainstream gamers. They put stuff out there. I see what they put out there, and I'm reacting to it. I'm trying to pluck out the truths and the facts out of it so people don't get misled, because we've had 10 years of that. And I get people coming to me saying, you know what, MM, you were right. I wish I would have listened to you before about this. It's just that this content creator had a bigger number next to their name. You started talking about Stadia. I thought you went delusional. So I didn't listen to you, but you were right. Those things weren't going to come to fruition. All the things that I feared of the platform for the people that made the investments in the platform for expectation, all the fears that I thought that they would deal with, now they're coming to fruition. And now they're coming to me saying you were right. Those are the conversations that I'm having. Just being in this space within the last 3 years and just seeing random fanboys go back and forth, pony this, pony that, Xbox this, you don't have a clue of what's going on at a granular level. Doesn't mean that you have no understanding of gaming altogether. You don't have an understanding of the conversations and how deep they are and how deep they are in their origins and why. And to tell people who have been going back and forth in this area for that long, for those specific reasons, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I'm new here and it doesn't matter to me. That's the dismissiveness that I'm talking about. And the things that I'm focusing on right now, like when I talked about, 4K coming to PlayStation, that was based off of back and forths with Xbox gamers. Not me. You don't understand the scope. I will give you these names again so you can better relate. Tim Dog, D-Batch, Colt Eastwood, Dealer Gaming, Randolph Thor. That's like over 500,000 YouTube users or social media users or engagements alone. And if you want just Rebel FM is a great podcast too. That's all pro PlayStation stuff that are having those same conversations, that are not dismissive of them, but they're having them and saying, well, look, they missed the mark because of this and that and this and that. And we believe them when they say this and that. And look, we feel this and that, or this is what's going to happen. They're not delegitimizing the conversation. I don't agree with them, their takes on it, but they're not delegitimizing the conversation because these conversations are important to consumers, else we wouldn't be having them. If you can't relate, you can't relate. It's okay. Everything is not catered for you, just like everything isn't catered for me. On the PlayStation side, there's my brother Next Gen, but he does he has everybody on his podcast. Porter Rock, What's Up Pod PlayStation, great. Really, I really like the best deep diving that you're going to get into PlayStation content is What's Up with Jay Barry and Persona. And Reforged Gaming, he favors PlayStation, but he's not, like he did a show the other day where he was pro Starfield. So we'll close out with this. All the content that I've helped curate fits under a certain narrative. If you've been following my content, you know it started off with the medicine, cloud dosage, the prognosis, and others. And all that is focused on being a quote unquote remedy to the misinformation and deceit gamers are being subjected to at the consumer level. For instance, the medicine was short videos that I curated way back when to deal with fanboys trying to underplay Xbox's necessity within gaming. Even though I don't like what they're doing in the direction that they're taking things, they are essential. That's why I focus on them. You can, like when people say, oh, Xbox never did anything for gaming, that's a lie. There are people that I agree with as far as the state of Xbox now, who I feel try to take it so far and say, Xbox should have never been into gaming. They've never done anything for gaming. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Stop that. We just want them to do better. We think the path that they're on isn't good for the genre-defining space that made them what they are today. But we're not going to do that. Then there was the prognosis, which was the podcast version of the medicine. Then Stadia Dosage was born. And Stadia Dosage was simply the blueprint of the medicine and the prognosis, but instead of in favor of Xbox or discussions about Xbox, it was about discussions about Stadia and cloud gaming overall. I've always, with my personal content, not what I expect other people to get into or like, or how I expect them to track on this stuff. But I've always personally zeroed in on deceptive practices to consumers in gaming. I've never debated anyone on why they like what they like. So your admiration or lack thereof on the surface of a brand was never was my focal point of my content. It may be, like, for instance, with cloud dosage, I get a large chunk of the people don't see the Xbox product the way that I see it. So why am I going to sit there all day and go Xbox, Xbox this, Xbox that? I'm not going to do that there. Those people appreciate the platform for the scope that they do. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And therefore they deserve their space to talk about that appreciation, that admiration, along with things they want to see better, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. I wholeheartedly support that for anybody within the cloud space, because we want all these cloud platforms. I don't want xCloud to go away. I just want it to get better, but I want it to get better at a certain level. Other people want it to get better at other levels, and unification, we just want cloud gaming to get better and get more recognized. So I'm all for it, and that's why we continue to support all the platforms, all the ecosystems within the cloud gaming space, whether I personally you favor them or not. It's always been my focal point of my content has always been, where are gamers being deceived or robbed of an opportunity to get the facts on XYZ experience? How can we remedy that? So if what I'm referring to at a deeper level, you can't relate to, that's okay. Doesn't make you wrong. Doesn't make me right. But you can't dismiss the conversation, because there are much bigger communities that do appreciate Xbox and will defend it, that are having these same conversations. And we here at Hard Knock Digital Culture, MM2K Gaming, we are reacting to what's being put out there in the ethos, and we're saying, look, these are the facts behind it. These are not the facts behind it. No, look, Xbox has fallen short here. There's no excuses. Look, PlayStation didn't have a good showcase. But again, I refer back to the employee. It's hard being that employee that gets put on corrective action and got to have the weekly meetings and get called in the office every day. But damn it, there's got to be expectations, especially when people for years put thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars into these ecosystems because they were told, just give us some time. We're getting here. It's going to take a few years. But if you keep supporting this platform, that helps us get there, and we're going to get there. And they're not there. They're like, hold on. 10 years later, you're still not here. You know what? Thank you for your support. We were originally going to do that, but now we've changed our mind. No! chickens have to roost. Those are the conversations that we're having. So hopefully y'all appreciate that. I'm running late for my appointment. I'm just gonna read through a couple of comments. He said Diller is a snake. I don't agree with a lot of stuff that comes from that side. A lot of it is propagandized. It's over the top. I'll let listeners decide on who they like or who they don't like. But regardless of, even if it's somebody that I like I said, I've had to correct people on the importance of Xbox being in gaming altogether, that I agree with, that I like. So, I'll let people come up to their own conclusions, but they need to know who these people are, and they need to understand these conversations are being had, or they're not going to relate to the community that they need to help relate to cloud gaming. It's just a losing proposal. We're going to be swimming away from each other. He said, Tim Dog is the number one L takes on Twitter. He rivals Crap Gamer. Cold Eastwood got his own podcast now. Yeah, that's absolutely right. He started off with Z, converted to RDX, and now he has his own podcast. Absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you, Cold Blood. All right, with that said, I got to get out of here. I'm running late. Hopefully that makes some sense to some people. Hopefully, and again, I'm not saying this so you agree with me. Not at all. But understand there's a bigger conversation happening there. One that you can't relate to, but just for the sake of information, if you follow up with these people, maybe you can. And by you having a larger breadth of knowledge, that may help translate into helping to expose more people to cloud gaming, because now you can relate and now you can understand their language in doing so. That's important. With that said, I got to get out of here. Till next time, have a wonderful gaming day. Peace.